We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph in Meseches Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 53a. The Mishnah says, "Hanoder min hatamorim mutter b'dvash tamarim." If someone takes a neder not to have tamarim, not to have dates, it's mutter for him to have the honey that comes from the dates. Mistavanios, if someone takes a neder not to have, this is a certain kind of grapes. The Mefarish says, "Min hastavanios hainu anovim koshim." These are harder grapes. Shemanichan bekerem kol yimei hastav. They leave them in the vineyard during the cold season. V'yosen mehen chometz, and they make out of them a certain kind of vinegar. So again, the Mishnah says the same thing. Mutter b'chometz stavanios. It's mutter to have the vinegar that comes from these grapes. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseiro, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseiro says, "Kol sheshem toldaso kruya olav." Anything where the item that comes from it is called by the same name, like in these cases, the chometz. It's not just called vinegar. It's called the vinegar of stavanios. Same thing with dvash. It's called the dvash tamarim. So v'noder hemenu. So if he made a neder from the tamarim or from the stavanios, aser biyotze hemenu. It is aser, that which derives from it. So in other words, according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira argues with the Tanakama and says the dvash tamarim and the chometz stavanios are aser. The chachamim matirim, and the Mishnah concludes that the chachamim, they say it's permissible. It seems as though the chachamim are saying the same thing as the Tanakama, which the Gemara now addresses. The Gemara says, "Chachamim hainu Tanakama." Aren't the chachamim saying the same exact thing as the Tanakama? They're saying that the dvash tamarim and the chometz stavanios are mutter. The Gemara says, "Ika beinayu." There's a difference between the chachamim and the Tanakama as follows: Hada Tanya, with regards to the following brisa. The brisa says, "Klal ze Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar." Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar has the following rule: "Kol shedarko lechol v'derech hayotz mimenu lechol." Let's say you have something which you could eat the item, and you also eat that which derives from the item. Kagon tamarim udvash tamarim. For example, let's say dates. People eat dates, and people also eat the honey that comes from the dates. So nadar bo aser biyotze mimenu. So if he makes a neder from the item itself, it's also going to be aser, the honey that comes from the dates, that which comes from it. Noder miyotze mimenu. And similarly, if you make a neder from that which derives from the dates, meaning you make a neder from the dvash tamarim, from the honey of the dates, aser bo, it's aser to have the dates as well, since both are edible, both are included in each kind of neder. Kol she'ein darko lechol. Now let's say you have something which it's not normal to eat that item, v'derech hayotzi mimenu lechol, but it is normal to eat that which comes from the item, and that, the example for that would be stavanios. It's not normal to eat the grapes, they're too hard, but you do eat the vinegar that comes from the grapes. So no derbo, so if you make a neder in it, meaning from the grapes themselves, ein aser ela biyotzi mimenu. The only thing that's prohibited is that which derives. Shalom neskavin zeh ela liyotzi mimenu. The point of Rav Shimon ben Elazar is the whole person's intention was he's making a neder from that which you normally eat. Nobody eats these hard grapes. He wasn't referring to it, even though he said that. What he was actually referring to was the juice that derives from it. And the Mefarish explains, Tanakama de Masnis, in the Tanakama of our Mishnah, the Amar Mutter B'chometz Tavanios, the Tanakama of the Mishnah said he's allowed to have the vinegar from these hard grapes. When he makes a neder not to have the hard grapes, it only means the hard grapes. Less later, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, the Tanakama does not agree with Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Ela Kasavar, rather the Tanakama holds simply, Nadar bo ein aser ela bo. You make a neder from a particular item, you're aser only from that particular item. You make a neder from stavanios, you're aser from stavanios, not aser from chometz stavanios. Afagav shein darko lechol, even though it's something that normally isn't eaten. Even though people don't eat these hard grapes, you made a neder not to eat hard grapes, that's what you said, that is what is aser. The Chachamim Tana Basrois Lu. Now the Chacham at the end of our Mishnah, who say the Chachamim Matirim, so them Islahu to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. They actually do agree with Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. With the Katani the Chachamim Matirim Bo Begufa. When the Chachamim say it is mutter, what they mean to say is it is mutter to have just the item itself. That's what they're referring to. Meaning, if you say you're making a neder not to have stvanios, it's still mutter to have the stvanios. Aval biyotze mimenu lo. However, that which derives from the stvanios, that you cannot have. That is prohibited. Dein aser ela biyotze mimenu. What's prohibited is only that which derives, because this is something that is not normally eaten. V'hainu Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. That follows Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Damar lo neskavin zevachulu. Says again, the person's intention was that which derives from the item, because the item itself is not normally eaten. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira haya oser bo v'yotze hemenu. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, he's strict across the board. He says that it's aser in the stavanios and the chometz stavanios. It's aser the tamarim and the dvash tamarim. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hanoder min hayayin, if someone takes a neder not to have wine, mutter b'yein tapuchim, he's allowed to have apple wine, or what we would refer to as apple cider, because yayin really just means from grapes, it does not mean from apples. Min hashemen, let's say a person says he's not going to have shemen oil, mutter b'shemen shum shemen, he's allowed to have sesame oil, because the term oil really refers to olive oil. Min hadvash, let's say a person says he's not going to have dvash, not going to have honey, mutter b'dvash tamarim, he can have the honey that comes from dates, because the word dvash, honey, generally implies honey that comes from bees. Min hachometz, let's say he says from vinegar, mutter b'chometz tevanios, he can have the vinegar that comes from these late grapes, those hard grapes, because chometz really refers to vinegar that comes from regular grapes. Min hakreation, let's say a person says he's not going to have leeks, mutter b'kaplotos, he's allowed to have kaplotos, that is a kind of leek that is not referred to as a regular leek. Min hayerek, if he says he's not going to have vegetables, mutter b'yarkos hasade, he's allowed to have the wild vegetables of the field, shu shem levoi, because again that has an accompanying name, those are not referred to just as regular yerek. And the Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in a Braisa, Hanoder min Hashem, and let's say a person takes a neder not to have oil, be'eretz Yisrael, so if he's in Eretz Yisrael, mutter b'shemen shum shemen, he's allowed to have sesame oil, v'yasser b'shemen zayis, and he's not allowed to have olive oil, because in Eretz Yisrael, the term shemen refers to olive oil. Ubebavel, but if he's in Bavel, asr b'shemen shum shemen, it's asr for him to have sesame oil, umutter b'shemen zayis, and he's allowed to have olive oil, because in Bavel, the term shemen refers to sesame oil. Mokum shemistafkin mizeh umizeh. Now let's say he's in a place where they have both kinds of oil. So aser bazeh uvazeh, then he's aser in both kinds of oil. The Gemara says, Pshita, isn't this obvious? The Gemara says, Lo, no, tzricha is needed. It's not obvious. Deruba min chad mistapkin. Let's say you're in a place where the majority is using a particular one of the oils, but both oils are used. So ma'u detema ezel basar ruba. I might think you should follow the majority. If the majority, for example, use olive oil, maybe the term oil is only referring to olive oil. Kamash malon. So that's what the Brisa comes to teach us. Safik isura l'chumra. That here it's a suffix over here. We don't know exactly what the person meant, and when you have a suffix by involving isurim, so we go l'chumra and we say both kinds of oil are prohibited. And the Gemara continues, Hanoder min hayerek bishar shnei shavua. Let's say a person makes a neder from yerek, from vegetables, and we're talking not during a Shemitah year. So aser biyarkos hagina. So it's aser for him to have garden vegetables, because usually people are eating garden vegetables when it's not a Shemitah year. That's what he's referring to. Umutter biyarkos hasada. But he's allowed to have the wild vegetables that grow in the fields. He was not referring to that. Ubashvias, but if it happens to be a Shemitah year, then it's the exact opposite. Aser biyarkos hasada. Then he's forbidden to have the wild vegetables of the field, because that's what people usually eat during a Shemitah year. Umutter b'yarkos hagina, and he's allowed to have the garden vegetables, because that's something that people generally don't eat during the Shemitah year, and therefore he was not referring to yarkos hagina. Amar Rabbi Yavo mishum Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. Rabbi Yavo says in the name of Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis.